The sun blazed over the Mexican desert as a convoy of masked cartel gunmen surrounded a lone trucker's rig. They thought they had an easy target, just another American crossing dangerous roads. But they had no idea who was behind the wheel. Retired Green Beret Jack Calloway wasn't about to surrender. Have you ever heard a story where the bad guys messed with the wrong person? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more. The desert highway stretched endlessly under the scorching sun, a ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through an unforgiving landscape of dust, rocks, and sparse vegetation. The air shimmered with heat, and even the wind seemed to carry a weight of dry desperation. It was the kind of place where anything could happen, and no one would be around to see it. Jack Callahan had spent most of his life on the road. A retired Green Beret turned long-haul trucker, he had traded military convoys for cross-country freight runs, preferring the solitude of the open road to the chaos of the cities he once fought in. His 18-wheeler, a midnight black Peterbilt, rumbled steadily along the highway, its massive chrome grille gleaming in the relentless sunlight. The radio crackled softly, playing an old country song as he sipped his lukewarm coffee. His road took him deep into cartel territory, but that didn't bother him much. He had seen worse. War zones, ambushes, firefights in the middle of nowhere. None of it shook him. Trucking had its dangers, but he was prepared. He kept a loaded .45 under his seat, a sawed-off shotgun in the sleeper, and enough awareness to spot trouble before it found him. But sometimes, trouble didn't give a man a chance to see it coming. Jack had just crossed an abandoned gas station when he noticed the two SUVs in his mirrors. Blackout windows, no license plates, matching speeds with him a little too perfectly. He exhaled through his nose, his instincts kicking in. He had been in enough bad situations to recognize the start of one. They didn't make a move immediately. They just sat there, their predatory presence a silent warning. Jack kept his hands steady on the wheel, his gaze flicking between the road and the rear-view mirror. Then, as if the desert itself had swallowed the last vestiges of normalcy, the lead SUV suddenly accelerated, swerving into his lane. Jack muttered a curse, gripping the wheel tighter as the SUV veered ahead, braking hard and forcing him to slow down. The second vehicle moved up alongside him, boxing him in. His muscles coiled with anticipation. He had been targeted. Jack's heartbeat remained steady, his mind shifting into a state of calm calculation. These weren't just random thieves looking to steal a rig full of freight. This was a coordinated maneuver, military style. Cartel gunmen, smugglers maybe, or hijackers looking to use his truck for something far worse than stolen cargo. The SUV in front of him braked again, hard enough that he had to yank his wheel to the right to avoid slamming into it. His tires kicked up dust as his truck wobbled slightly. He let it correct itself, his foot hovering over the brake. Up ahead, an old gas station sat abandoned, its rusted-out pumps and broken windows the only sign that life had once passed through here. The SUV in front of him turned into the lot, slowing to a stop. Jack clenched his jaw. This wasn't random. They wanted him off the road. The second SUV cut in sharply, forcing him to follow. Jack exhaled slowly, pulling his truck into the station's cracked pavement. He shifted into neutral, keeping the engine running. He could see them now. 4 men stepping out of the SUVs, all wearing black tactical gear, their faces covered with masks, rifles slung over their shoulders. Definitely cartel. Jack cracked his knuckles, then reached under his seat. They had made a serious mistake. Jack kept his hands steady on the wheel, watching through the side mirror as the cartel gunmen fanned out around his truck. Their movements were deliberate, coordinated. These weren't low-level thugs looking for a quick score. They were professionals. The leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, tapped the butt of his rifle against Jack's door. "Out! Now!" he barked in Spanish-accented English. Jack didn't move right away. Instead, he took a deep breath, letting his mind assess the situation. There were 4 of them. 2 had their rifles trained on him, while the others checked the perimeter. The SUVs were positioned to block an escape route, and they had likely scouted the area beforehand. This was a well-planned hijacking. Jack opened the door slowly, keeping his movements calm. He stepped down from the cab, his boots crunching against the dry gravel. The heat of the desert pressed against his skin, but his pulse remained steady. The leader grinned. "Good. Smart, old man." He motioned to one of his men. "Check the truck." Jack's stomach tensed. He had cargo in the back, sure. Industrial machinery. Nothing valuable enough to justify a hijacking like this. No, these guys weren't after what he was carrying. They wanted the rig itself, either to transport drugs, weapons, or worse, people. One of the gunmen moved toward the back of the truck. Another kept his rifle trained on Jack. "You military?" the leader asked, eyeing Jack's stance, the calm in his eyes. Jack smirked. "Used to be." The leader chuckled. "Thought so. But you're too old to be a threat." Jack said nothing. His eyes flickered to the gunman inspecting the truck, then back to the man in front of him. He needed an opening. The leader stepped closer. "We need your truck. You can walk away. If you don't..." He tapped his rifle against his palm. "You won't." Jack rolled his shoulders, feigning submission. "And if I say no?" The leader chuckled again, shaking his head. "Why do old men always have to make things difficult?" Jack's fingers twitched slightly. The grip of his concealed .45 was inches away, tucked into the waistband at his back, but he needed them to drop their guard. The gunman at the back of the truck called out, "It's clear." The leader nodded. "Good, now dash." Jack moved. With the speed of a man who had seen real combat, he spun, grabbing the rifle of the man closest to him and jerking it upward. The shot fired harmlessly into the sky. In the same motion, he drove his elbow into the man's throat, sending him staggering. Chaos erupted. The leader raised his rifle, but Jack was faster. He drew his .45, fired twice, one in the leader's leg, the other in the shoulder of the nearest gunman. The cartel members shouted, scrambling for cover. Jack dove behind the front of his truck, gripping his pistol tightly. This fight was just getting started. The sharp scent of gunpowder hung in the dry desert air as Jack pressed his back against the front of his truck, listening for movement. His mind worked fast, calculating his next move. He had managed to disarm and wound 2 of them, but there were still 2 gunmen left, and they were regrouping quickly. A burst of gunfire ricocheted off the side of his rig, forcing him lower. The cartel gunmen weren't panicking yet, but they were cautious now. Jack knew that hesitation was his advantage. He just needed to press it. The leader groaned in pain from where he had fallen, clutching his bleeding leg. "Kill him!" he barked. Jack peeked around the corner just in time to see one of the remaining gunmen flanking left, using the SUVs for cover. The other was moving to the right, trying to trap him in a crossfire. Smart, but not smart enough. Jack reached into his vest pocket, fingers brushing against the smooth surface of a road flare. He yanked it free, igniting it with a quick snap. A blinding red glow filled the air, thick smoke billowing instantly. He tossed it over the hood of his truck, landing near the front bumper. The flare distracted the nearest gunman just long enough for Jack to act. He darted forward, using the thick smoke as cover. His boots barely made a sound against the gravel as he closed the distance. The gunman turned, eyes wide, too late. Jack grabbed the barrel of his rifle, twisting it violently to the side. The man grunted in surprise as Jack drove a hard punch into his ribs, then another to his jaw. The gunman crumpled to the ground, unconscious before he even hit the dirt. One left. Jack turned just as the last gunman fired. The shot grazed his shoulder, a hot, searing pain cutting through his jacket. Gritting his teeth, Jack ignored it and returned fire, his .45 kicking back in his hand. The gunman staggered back, a red bloom spreading across his chest. He collapsed, his rifle clattering onto the ground beside him. Silence. Jack exhaled, scanning the scene. 3 down, 1 wounded. The leader still groaned in pain, trying to crawl toward his fallen weapon. Jack strode over and stomped on the man's hand, pinning it to the dirt. He leveled his gun at the cartel boss's face. "Looks like you picked the wrong truck." The cartel leader gritted his teeth, his breath ragged from the pain of his gunshot wound. Jack kept his foot firmly on the man's hand, his grip on the .45 unwavering. "You don't know who you're messing with," the leader spat, blood staining his teeth. Jack smirked, pressing down harder. "Oh, I think I do. Question is, do you know who you just tried to hijack?" The leader didn't answer, his dark eyes calculating. He wasn't afraid. That made Jack uneasy. The distant sound of approaching vehicles caught Jack's attention. Headlights flickered against the desert horizon. Backup. Jack had expected them to call for reinforcements, but not this fast. His truck was still in working condition, but there was no way he'd be able to outrun multiple SUVs on open road. His only option was to disappear. Jack crouched down, yanking the radio from the cartel leader's vest. "Tell them to turn around," he ordered. The man chuckled. "You think they'll listen? You're a dead man." Jack grabbed the man by his collar and yanked him upright, pressing the barrel of his gun to his temple. "Then I guess you'll be the first to go." The leader's smirk faltered. He hesitated, then reached for the radio with his free hand. Before he could speak, a voice crackled through the speaker. "We're closing in. 5 minutes out." Jack looked around. The desert stretched for miles with no cover beyond the abandoned buildings near the roadside. He had to think fast. He dragged the leader toward the wrecked SUV, forcing him into the driver's seat. "You're driving," Jack ordered. The leader scoffed but winced when Jack shoved the gun against his ribs. "And go where?" Jack glanced at his truck, then at the approaching lights. "We're leading them away." The leader hesitated. "They'll know something's up." "Then you better make it convincing," Jack said. The man glared at him, then started the engine. Jack climbed into the back seat, keeping his gun aimed at the back of the leader's head. They pulled onto the road just as the reinforcements came into view. 3 black SUVs, headlights glowing like predatory eyes. Jack ducked down, keeping out of sight as the leader lifted the radio. "The American's rig is trashed," he lied, his voice steady. "I took him down, but I need help moving the body." A pause, then, "Copy that, we'll follow you in." Jack grinned. He didn't need to outrun them. He just needed to get them where he wanted them. The convoy turned, following the leader's vehicle away from Jack's semi-truck. Jack's plan was falling into place. Now, he just had to survive what came next. As the convoy sped through the desert, Jack kept his gun pressed against the cartel leader's ribs, his mind racing. The cartel had fallen for his bluff, but it wouldn't take long for them to realize something was wrong. He had to act fast. The abandoned warehouse up ahead would be the perfect place to make his stand. He had noticed it on the drive-in, its rusted walls and broken windows barely visible against the desert backdrop. If he could funnel them inside, he could use the shadows, his training, and a little creativity to even the odds. "Pull into that warehouse," Jack ordered, keeping his voice calm but firm. The cartel leader clenched his jaw. "They'll figure it out." Jack smirked. "That's the plan." As they neared the building, the SUVs slowed, their headlights cutting through the swirling dust. Jack could feel the tension rising. This was going to be close. The moment the truck rolled to a stop, he sprang into action. Using the butt of his pistol, he struck the cartel leader hard against the temple, knocking him out cold. No time to hesitate. Jack needed to disappear into the shadows before the others arrived. Slipping out of the truck, he sprinted toward the warehouse, his boots barely making a sound against the cracked concrete. He found a vantage point near the rafters, pressing himself against the cold metal beams just as the first gunman entered. "They said the American was down," one of the men muttered, scanning the area. Jack grinned to himself. Time to show them just how wrong they were. Using an old wrench, he lobbed it across the warehouse, letting it clatter loudly against the far wall. The sound sent the gunman spinning in the wrong direction, giving Jack the perfect opening. He dropped down from the rafters, landing behind the last man in the group. With swift precision, he wrapped an arm around the thug's neck, cutting off his air supply in seconds. One down. The others turned at the sound of their comrade hitting the ground, but Jack had already melted into the shadows. Years of training kicked in. Silent movement, controlled breathing, patience. He could hear their panicked whispers, the nervous shuffle of their boots on the dusty floor. "Where is he?" one of them hissed. Jack didn't wait. Moving like a ghost, he struck again, knocking another man unconscious with a brutal strike to the back of the head. 2 down. Now, the remaining cartel members were truly on edge. Jack could hear it in their breathing, see it in the way they hesitated. They were used to being the predators. They weren't used to being hunted. "You made a big mistake coming after me," Jack called out from the darkness, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. A shot rang out as one of the cartel members panicked and fired blindly into the shadows. Jack smirked. Desperate men make mistakes. Using their fear against them, he moved in quickly, striking the next attacker with a vicious elbow, then grabbing his weapon before he could react. Within seconds, Jack had taken down another. The last man standing dropped his gun and raised his hands. "Wait, please." Jack kicked the gun away, his icy stare locking onto the trembling thug. "You thought I was just some old trucker, didn't you?" He stepped closer, letting the man see exactly who he had picked a fight with. "Big mistake." The man nodded frantically. I didn't know." Jack let out a slow breath. "Now you do." Before the gunman could react, Jack swung, knocking him unconscious. The warehouse fell silent. Jack took a moment to steady himself, his heart pounding in his chest. He had taken down the entire group with nothing but his wits and training, but he wasn't out of the woods yet. The cartel leader was still unconscious in the truck. Jack knew the man wouldn't stay down forever. He had 2 choices: leave him for the authorities or make sure he never came after him again. Jack glanced at the radio he had taken earlier. He picked it up and pressed the button. "Your men are down," he said, his voice calm. "If I were you, I'd think twice before coming after me again." Static. Then a voice, low and measured. "We'll remember this, senor." Jack smirked. "Good, make sure you do." With that, he dropped the radio and walked away. He climbed into his semi, adrenaline still surging through his veins. As he started the engine, he glanced in the rearview mirror, watching the unconscious cartel members lying scattered in the warehouse. They had underestimated him, and now they would never forget the lesson he had just taught them.